Hey, so I thought in today's video I would talk about some of the books that have really impacted my life so far. When I say they are life-changing, I really do mean it. I'm not exaggerating because they resonated so deeply with me. It really blew my mind, and they have made such a big impact on my spiritual journey and my growth. And so these books are really important to me, and I hope they can help you out. And I guess that's partly why some of these books are actually by the same authors. So yeah, let's get into it. So A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. Or Tolle? Tolle. So I love this book. This was my very first book on my journey so far. But just to give some context, before reading this book, I was not into spirituality whatsoever. I just got to a point in my life that I was really unhappy. I didn't really enjoy the home environment that I grew up in. I had no direction in life. I felt like I was so lost and had zero clue of what I was going to do with my life. And prior to this, my boyfriend and I at the time had broken up, and so it was just not a good time. And so I guess just being so unhappy got me much more open to personal development and spirituality. So A New Earth was the book that initiated my spiritual awakening. It did that by, helping me understand the mechanism of the ego so that I could see it within myself and then start to disidentify with it over time. And this book taught me so much about myself. It got me aware of my inner voice, the voice in my head. It helped me become aware of my own pain body, which I came to realize that I had a very strong and heavy pain body. And I used to think that the ego was just a way to describe someone who was arrogant or full of themselves. But after reading, and learning about the ego through this book, I came to realize that I have a very strong ego, and that it was just more in the sense of it was an inferior ego, that it was never good enough and I was unworthy. And so we all have an ego, it's just human nature. And so I still have an ego, but it's definitely not as strong as it used to be, because this book definitely helped me realize my ego and to disidentify with it over time. Power versus Force by David Hawkins. So at this point in my spiritual journey, I was in my wake-up stage. I was devouring everything and anything I could about spirituality. I was just so excited, so into it, and just reading as much as I could. And so this book, after reading A New Earth, A New Earth had introduced me to the concept of consciousness. But Power versus Force, David Hawkins introduces us to the map of consciousness, which was it blew my mind, because it was just an easier way for me to comprehend and digest the idea of consciousness and how it's expressed in human behavior. And I remember it resonated so deeply with me because I love connecting the dots. I love pattern recognition. And so this book just gave me more material to work with that. I saw all these patterns in society and obviously in myself. And I remember I actually watched The Secret right before I started reading A New Earth and getting into spirituality and everything. And, I felt like I didn't fully get it at the time. I just got really excited from it. It was basically my gateway drug into spirituality. But I felt like I was very limited in my understanding with The Secret, with the law of attraction and everything. But reading Power versus Force, this book kind of made me realize oh, this is the law of attraction explained. And so we attract what we are, what level of consciousness we are. And so I guess that was kind of the missing puzzle piece for me of The Secret that I didn't fully understand. And so reading this book, I realized that, oh my gosh, this is the puzzle piece that kind of made me understand law of attraction a bit better. And so it really goes to show how important it is to grow our consciousness, to evolve it. And so that was a big aha for me, is just understanding that there are different levels of consciousness. And I really did see how it relates to the law of attraction. So Letting Go, also by David Hawkins. So this book is amazing. After reading Power versus Force, I was how do I grow my consciousness? How do I evolve my consciousness? How do I move up the map of consciousness? And so Letting Go is the how-to book in how to do that. And this book actually created quite a shift in my spiritual journey. I went from, being in the wake-up stage of devouring as much as I could about spirituality. And now with Letting Go, it created a shift in my journey, and I went from the wake-up stage into the internal work stage. And so this book was basically the how-to for my internal work. This is basically where I started to put everything I learned into action. I started to take action, which is such an important step in the spiritual journey. And this book has been life-changing for my spiritual growth. Basically, it gave me emotional intelligence, which I did not have before. I was definitely an emotional idiot. And it helped me deal with my pain body. A New Earth talked about the pain body, and now I had the tools through Letting Go to deal with it. This was basically the how to disidentify with the pain body. And so I have to admit, I was a little skeptical at the beginning because in, the early chapters of the book, David Hawkins does share that, this is a simple and effective method. But how many times have we been promised that in our lives, right? And it never really produces the results we expected. But, looking back in hindsight, this book, definitely I can see why he made that promise, because it's true. At least it is for me. So while I was reading this book, I was at a point where I was already in a happy, healthy relationship, but I still had a bit of old lingering resentments left towards my ex-boyfriend. We had a very unhealthy and dysfunctional relationship. So I thought I'd give this method a try, and surprisingly, it actually worked right away, and those resentments actually never came back. It worked so well, I actually don't even remember what I was resentful of. So the difference between Power versus Force and Letting Go is that in the book Power versus Force, David Hawkins shares basically like a general overview of the different levels of consciousness and how it's expressed out in the world, how it's seen in society, different cultures, things like that. But in Letting Go, it focuses more on the individual. So he goes into further detail about each level of consciousness and how it's expressed in our lives. Having that deeper understanding definitely helps with the letting go process in which he shares. And it's basically how to let go of negative emotions so that we can grow our consciousness. So having a deeper understanding of the different levels of consciousness help us to let go of the lower emotions that keep us stuck at these stages. And so when we let go of these negative states, we can move up the ladder of consciousness. So this book is really important to me because it helped me have a deeper understanding of different levels of consciousness and basically gave me the tools to help me let go of the lower states of consciousness to help me move up the levels. And it created such a shift in my journey going from the wake-up stage to the internal work stage, which I definitely see as being one of the most important points in my life. Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza. So at this point of my spiritual journey, I was already practicing the letting go method, and I had already done a silent meditation retreat, which was totally profound, and it was also life-changing for me. But I was in a very uncomfortable phase in my life. I felt like I was in this world of the unknown, which was really uncomfortable, and I was in no man's land for so long. But basically what happened at that point was I felt like I had my ego masks stripped of me, so I felt like, my fake persona that kept me safe was totally gone, and I felt so naked, I felt so vulnerable. It was not a very fun place to be in. So my old life started to fall apart. I started to grow apart from my best friends, and things were changing, and I just wasn't ready for it. And I was so uncomfortable. I was so scared. So in this book, Joe Dispenza shares a lot of scientific research and data to basically explain everything that I was personally going through. It explained, all the changes that were happening after I had started meditating, all the changes that were happening after I started doing my inner work. And so it kind of gave me a reassurance that I was on the right path. It confirmed to me that everything I was going through was normal and that it would be uncomfortable because change is going to happen in the unknown. So that's completely normal. And if it were comfortable, that would just mean that I would be staying in the same situation, in the same place in my life. But because I was feeling uncomfortable in this phase, this book reassured me that that was okay. So just like Power versus Force, breaking the habit of being yourself also explains the law of attraction. Joe Dispenza talks about how our habitual thought and emotional patterns basically create our reality. And he shares research and data from quantum physics, neuroscience, and biology to kind of explain the whole thing. The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. So I have to admit that when I initially tried to read this book, it was right after I read A New Earth. And I honestly just couldn't get into it. I definitely wasn't ready for it at the time. But at this stage of my journey, after I had read all the books, started getting into, meditation and doing my inner work, I was finally ready for it. And so I read this book, and I don't know, it just kind of had this like magical effect on me. It wasn't really so much of what I was reading and what I was understanding that kind of made the change. It was like on a deeper level. Like, I don't know how else to explain it, but it definitely created a shift within me. So reading it, I feel like it definitely deepened my presence. It helped me deepen my awareness. And so, this book, I don't really have much else to say other than it changed my life. And it's just really as simple as that. It just had this magical effect. I don't know how or why, but I guess it's just one of those things that when it just changes you so deeply from within, like, there's not much else to say. It's not something that you conceptually get or that you can mentally understand, but it created a shift in me, and I love this book. Just like with my other books, I always do refer back to it, and it always just has so many ahas in it. Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. So this book came at a time when I really needed it the most. I was going through one of my most challenging dark nights of the soul, and I remember we got it at a book sale. It was like staring at me from across the way, and it was the only copy, and so I thought that was a score. And yeah, this book is amazing. It was a reminder that I needed to hear to continue with doing my internal work. And so if A New Earth was talking about the mechanism of the ego and letting go was the mechanism of surrendering and letting go, I feel that Untethered Soul is basically a combination of the two books together. Just like with a lot of spiritual books and everything out there, is that it's basically sharing the same message of truth, but just said in a different way. And so I really love the way that Michael Singer articulates and explains things in a way that we can understand and relate to. Because in this book, he shares about how to deal with the energy sensations within our bodies. And it reminds me of when I did my silent meditation retreat, which was through Vipassana. And it basically was sharing that same message too. We meditated to get more aware of the sensations within our bodies. Michael Singer shares about it in a way that we could deal with it on a day-to-day basis. So basically in regular life, without having to sit down and meditate, like he basically shows you the process of how to deal with these energy sensations. So along with meditation, these books have shaped my spiritual practice, and they have helped me so much on my journey. I do definitely go back and reread them. It's always such a good reminder because, life goes on, distractions happen, and sometimes we forget. So reading these books again definitely help remind me of the teachings and to continue on with the inner work. And so that's how these 6 books changed my life and how they've made such an impact on my spiritual growth. And I hope that it'll inspire you to maybe read some of them too. If you've actually already read some of them, I'd love to hear in the comments what you thought of them and what kind of impact it made in your life. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.